Camp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you can see, this is an issue of management. This isn't an issue of politics. It's not an issue of, you know, gotcha. We're just trying to figure this out. And I want to pick up where the chairman left off, which is, seems like we don't really know what we have. And we've got what we do know, you've got categorized, but yet it doesn't seem like we've got, I'm going to just move over so I can see you, Mr. Mader. You know, what we do have, what we do know is that we don't know everything. Is that a fair statement?
I think, Senator, we have a better handle in 20—
No, I'm just saying, if I said today that the United States government, OMB or whatever, GSA, knows exactly where every piece of property, real property, that the federal government owns, where it is and how it's being utilized. Could you say yes to that?
To 100% accuracy, no, ma'am.
Right. And so the sense that I get is that without having a broad scan, it's very hard to kind of figure out where the low-hanging fruit is, where the opportunities are, maybe to build a structure or build a plan for moving forward. And I think we've heard some great ideas just from this panel and from you all, great examples of where this can work. But it can't be, you know, catch as catch can. We've got to have a structure. And we've got to have agencies, and I'm not here to blame anyone, but we've got to have agencies that are committed to this goal. And it's interesting, Mr. Mader, that what you talked about were agencies that had an incentive to actually alienate the property and move it beyond. I want to just spend what time I have left talking about the ability to expand your workforce by engaging in public-private partnerships, whether it is with the local realtors, whether it is taking a look at who we could hire or what additional resources could be brought to bear by the public. And by the local real estate market to solve these problems. Have you thought about, you know, what any corporation would do that didn't have a workforce? What would they do? They'd hire real estate people, and they would put it on the market. They'd do an evaluation. Why don't we do something like that so we could expand your opportunity in your workforce?
Senator, we couldn't agree with you more. You know, looking at how to partner with other individuals, organizations is something that we have done. I think actually Mr. Dong has some very good examples of how GSA has actually leveraged that successfully over the last couple of years.
Well, so why aren't we doing it kind of broadly?
If you look at what we're doing within GSA, we rely heavily upon the broker community to help us with the disposition question as well as with our leasing transactions. So one of the properties that we're disposing of this year is the Metro West facility in Baltimore. We're leveraging broker resources to help us with the outreach and the marketing on that. So I think you're exactly right. We have all these resources at our disposal that we really need to embrace and tap into as we look at this question of disposition. On that larger question of leasing, we rely heavily upon the brokers to help us with the different aspects of those transactions, whether it's pre-award or post-award. We have a new leasing contract that we'll be awarding sometime in early 2016 that actually reduces the administrative burden and makes it easier for the government to tap into that resource.
Do you think it's fair to say that kind of the inability to do as-is transactions limits the ability to alienate property? I mean, this idea that things have to come up to code. I mean, throughout the environment, you know, we see tons of dilapidated properties being sold at a much reduced price. But two good things happen. Number one, they get improved, and number two, they're added back to the local property tax rolls. And so where within that category can we be a little more creative?
I think there are a number of different challenges that we've talked about in terms of the challenges that agencies face as they look to move properties off the books. I think what the largest one is that whole notion of retention of proceeds, where agencies have to incur costs, but they don't have the ability to recoup those costs. So there really has been no economic benefit for many agencies to move these properties off the books. So that's why I think having some limited retention of proceeds where agencies can recoup their costs will show dramatic results in terms of the activity that we see.
Yeah, the other, and this might be just far-fetched and far afield, but as James and I have said, you have two new eyes on this issue, very committed. But, you know, there's a ton of folks who could do walkthroughs and actually evaluate. One of the concerns that I have is that if you're an agency head and you have an asset already, chances are you want to hang on to that asset, right? Especially if somebody else is paying the overhead. And so what are we doing to actually investigate and inspect those facilities? And, you know, I was thinking, well, you get a bunch of college kids who in the summer who may be involved in business, and you could say, do a walkthrough, here's your ticket. Walk through, tell us whether that space is actually being utilized the way the agency head or way the division director is telling us it's being utilized. And I think that's another concern I have, that we're understating the underutilization of federal property.
There was a point in our history where GSA actually used to do exactly that, and that function was established by executive order that really charged GSA with going into those federal properties and kind of walking the floors and really kind of coming up with an independent assessment of how that facility was being used. Looking at it a different way, coming back to the data in the federal real property portfolio, and the agency reduced the footprint plans that will be submitted this summer, you know, we see that as an opportunity to go through the list one by one of assets that have been labeled as underutilized or unutilized, and really force more meaningful disposition on what our plan is for each of those assets.
With my little remaining time, Senator Langford has suggested taking a look at agencies. I also think it would be interesting to take a look at states, because states obviously also have real property. There may be a management structure that they have that actually may demonstrate or look at best practices. And so it would be interesting to get any feedback, maybe if I have a chance to ask additional questions, to get additional feedback on what state you think is, as a governmental entity, is actually managing their real property in a way that is best practices. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.